Good morning, viewers. Welcome to Frankly Speaking with Vibhuti Jha. We have just experienced 2 weeks of major show by both the Democrats and the Republicans, showcasing their intent, their power as to why they must get a chance to run the country after 2020 elections. We have all seen that happen. Mr. Republican Party's convention got over only on Thursday night. And now we have the ability and opportunity to view and compare and contrast. Where do we go from here? And that's very, very important because this is a historic election in more ways than one. The reason why I say it is historic is primarily because there is an unconventional man in the White House, unpredictable, from the world of business, who is not a politician per se, but who has known the internal mechanisms of the politics forever that we know about. We also know that in 2016, Mr. Trump upended all conventional wisdom in terms of becoming the president, in terms of capturing the presidency. He was called, his supporters were also called deplorables by Mrs. Clinton. Now the question here is very simple. Is that how did this country allow or let or voted Mr. Trump to power, defeating virtually a queen, Clinton, who was considering that she would be anointed as the first ever woman president of the country. So to discuss this matter in all ramifications, plus and minus, good and bad, everything, I have great pleasure in welcoming two very prominent members of the Indian community, because this is important because we have to analyze the impact on India and us Indians in America back home. Who suits us the best, Trump or Biden? So I have great pleasure in welcoming Professor Amar. He's a professor of management at Seton Hall University in New Jersey. He runs an amazing program for the last 12 years where he takes the students on to India who do a course on credit course in his university on doing business with India, and definitely impacts the students' perception of India in a manner that is totally unheard of. On the other hand, I have a doctor, Dr. Krishna Bhatt, who lives in Maine. He's a urologist and a surgeon, very prominent in terms of his support for Mr. Trump, and very desirous of improving India-US relationship in a meaningful way. So both of you gentlemen are welcome. I will give the professor, since he's a professor, the first shot at your initial thought about the conventions that have happened. And I would definitely urge you to comment on both Democratic and Republican, but before that, I will give you 1 minute of my thought. I watched both the conventions very seriously, not only as a TV analyst or a presenter, but also because politics interests me, because political leadership makes an impact on everything that happens in our communities. But they are the most visible leaders in the community other than the business leaders, CEOs and whatever. So the question here is that in Biden Democratic Convention, I saw majority of the time, there was only one goal, one ambition, one fear, and that was called Donald Trump. As if the world will collapse if Trump wins again. That's what former President Obama said, that he doesn't even try to be the president. On the other hand, I saw the Republican convention. They were very powerful. They had an agenda. They showed a blueprint of the plan. And they also trashed the Democrats very effectively, including Mr. Biden, because 47 to 50 years of experience. And that's one thing which bothers me, is that in 47 years in the government, Mr. Biden, who was also part of 8 years in Obama administration as VP, they did nothing to what you call, to address the Black Lives Matter scenario, the systemic abuse the Blacks suffer from. And that's what they say, that why the Black Lives Matter is a statement about the fact that they are victims of systemic abuse by the whites. what did Obama and Biden do in 8 years of their being at the helm of affairs? And what did Biden do in 47 years of being in DC? Mr. Professor Amar, you go first.
Thank you. Thank you, Vibhuti. And it's a pleasure to be here this morning with you talking about the Republican Democratic conventions. I watched and followed both of them, and I do believe they showed a big difference. In fact, if you look at Democrats, and I also heard Biden when he did his acceptance speech, and when I looked at Trump and Trump's convention as well as his acceptance speech, the difference is right there. Right, those two things, Biden's acceptance and Biden's view or vision of the country for the remaining 4 years, and looking at Trump and his vision of the country for the next 4 years. Very evident difference between the two. One wants the country to become more like shared. Everything is shared, everything equal, everything alike or distributed. Whereas the second scenario, which is the Trump scenario, he wants everything excellent, highest, best, and he wants that to apply to the country. He wants that to apply to the economy. He wants that to apply to healthcare, even coronavirus. And when you look at the two, and in fact, looking at yesterday's acceptance speech he gave, I thought absolutely if I had any fear or doubt of it turning out to be a Biden White House, they all just disappeared. I thought Trump is so prepared, so ready to continue what he had been doing for the last 4 years that no one really can challenge him. And I have, if I had any kind of doubts or hesitation about him winning that November 3rd, 2020 election, they all went away.
That's a very powerful support to Mr. Trump's campaign and his presidency and acceptance. Dr. Bhatt, coming to you, I was going to ask you that there were two quick, very important points. One is the country going through a revolution of sorts. I won't say revolution or in the revolution, cultural revolution sorts, but it is kind of that revolution in which both the parties are having to deal with major scenarios with reference to police defunding, law and order maintenance, as well as coronavirus handling. So while I'm aware of the fact that all the governors of the areas most hit hard, New York, California, New Jersey, Oregon, these governors are on record paying Mr. Trump and his administration highest compliment in terms of support and extending all help to these states. These states represent the highest amount of casualty. So much so that Trump is being accused by Nancy Pelosi calling this Wuhan virus as Trump virus, and they are blaming him that he has not handled the situation well. Your thoughts as a physician, as you see the scenario very closely, is that what is the reason why countries like India and the United States have the highest number of cases, and they are the ones who are doing the highest number of testing as well? So the question here is, how do you relate with that, and your thoughts on the police part of it? And of course, I would want to hear your first impressions about the conventions. Doctor, are you there?
So, no, thank you. And I enjoyed meeting Professor Amar as well. And as you can see, we are kind of associated with an organization or a coalition that's batting for Mr. Trump's second innings. So what do I think of the convention? So there is one thing we can say, that problem of today, there are many problems of today, like the virus problem or the problem of riots. So that's one thing, but the dreams of tomorrow, and that's one difference I saw. The Democratic Party focused mostly on problems of today and how President Trump is not doing a good job. At least they try to portray that. And it's easy to criticize anyone, but from my point of view or from the data point of view, he has done a marvelous job on controlling or addressing both of them. But what the Republican Party gave was the dreams for tomorrow and what America can be, or how America can be great and stay great. And that greatness can come in innovation. That greatness is, I mean, the simple fact, like 2 years ago, most of us thought that manufacturing has to be China. You go in any store, even in India, buy a rakhi or buy an agarbatti. I mean, everything is made in China. Somehow that conversation has changed during the presidency of Mr. Trump. So I see that there is a conventions, like going forward and problems of today. That's how I see that big difference there.
Wonderful. But how would you talk about the scenario that is emerging, that Trump is getting a blame? Would you like to amplify a little bit on the fact that United States had the highest number of cases in the world, and with 185,000 deaths, his opponents are virtually in glee that we can blame him for the deaths. So what is happening on that account? Because there was a Yale professor, last week I heard him on the TV, who said about hydrochloroquine HCQ that it works, whereas Dr. Fauci and others say it doesn't work. So there is a huge element of anecdotal and research-based kind of thing. So what is the true story on that you can share with our audiences? And I actually, in a tweet, invited both Dr. Fauci and the Yale professor Herschel, somebody, who said that, both were opposing sides, one for and one against. So the public needs to know the truth, because everybody's right now suffering more out of fear. Now look at convention yesterday. In the convention, you saw thousands of people in the south lawn of the White House. They were without masks. Some of them were wearing, of course. And the left were making as an issue, is it safe or not? So what exactly is going on? So if people can be sitting in the presidential lawn to listen to president's acceptance speech, and people are rioting on the other hand, but 25 people can't assemble in a church, these are matters of confusion for people.
So Vibhuti Ji, we always take things as absolute truth. There is nothing called absolute truth, even in medicine. So you take the case of hydrochloroquine. There is anecdotal evidence or some evidence that it helps, but there is no absolute proof or absolute research that is going to convince the naysayers, because then you need a trial for 3-4 years. Mm-hmm. So there is always some truth, even on which a false stands. So there is no false narrative here. Both sides have some story that is based on some truth, but not 100% truth. So people who say, let us try, what's the harm in trying? Because the hydrochloroquine has been tried for years for malaria. And what harm can it do? Yes, it does have some side effects that can be monitored or that can be controlled, but it can be used in that sense. And that was the case. President Trump and some of these people who like to use it, they make that case. The other group, in which there are quite and Dr. Fauci and many others, who say we don't have absolute research proof on this, so why use it? And then the confusion happens because both take strong stands. For me, I'm a middle path person. I think if somebody is sick and there is a possibility and potential that that medicine will help, and that medicine has been in the market for many years, I would use it. But can I convince everyone to use it? It's not needed to convincing. And that's where I think the confusion comes from, because there is partial truth in both sides.
Well, we know that the world is, the life is all about Ardha Satya, as our philosophy says. Nothing is an absolute truth, but we seek the truth. My favorite statement is, there is never always a right answer, because there is always a better answer. So seeking a better solution is always better than seeking the rightest solution. And that's where the confusion says. I totally agree with you, doctor, is that if there is no medication available, let's try what can work, because it is, like you said very correctly, that no science is perfect. Even medical science is in an experimental stage, which another nuclear oncologist once told me, that we are still experimenting with the body because we still don't know everything about how the chemical reactions happen in the body. So we are also in the discovery mode for everything else. So here is the important part. I will switch to Professor Amar, in the Republican Party, there are certain people, Professor Amar, who are Reno, Republicans in name only. There are Republicans who from 2016 onwards are never Trumpers. And now Bush, Romney, and the supporter of McCain, they have issued a statement saying that no Trump, and they are endorsing Biden. How do you relate with the Republican Party? Would it be fair to call them the Jaychens, the modern Jaychens of American politics?
Okay, I will answer your question, but let me look at the question of coronavirus.
Okay.
First, and I'm not going to go to medical science. Dr. Bhatta is really expert on that. But medical science doesn't even have treatment for common cold. What are you talking about, coronavirus or this? And common cold, in fact, is a kind of coronavirus. So I'm not sure if they would ever be able to get a perfect cure for coronavirus or common cold. So under these conditions, we have always believed that when someone is a doctor, is licensed, is MD or MBBS or whatever it is, one has the judgment to decide how to treat a patient. And if the doctor decides to give hydrochloroquine to treat, or doctor decides to give remdesivir to treat, it is up to the doctors. And anyone trying to criticize what the doctors are doing are really trying to simply play the politics game. So that was my footnote to Dr. Bhatta's answer on that. Now, let me come to your question about what you call these Republican Jaychens. And you are very right. It's because, remember, I endorsed Romney when he contested. I also endorsed McCain when he contested. And of course, McCain now passed away, so let's leave him out. But Romney is still here, a senator, and who is trying to make a difference. If Romney was for or against issues pertaining to Trump, I would have understood. But that is not the case. Romney is against Trump. So whatever Trump will do or say, Romney will go opposite. So it is simply a matter of, I would say, quote unquote, jealousy. He did not expect Trump to win when he had lost. And that proves Trump is better with the public than Romney. And he never got over it. So count him as a person who will always be a vote against, and have enough safety margin that you still end up winning the issue. That is political side of it. Now, Trump also had several misstatements, misspoken words and all that, because as you said in your opening statement, he is not a politician. he happened to be in politics, he happened to love politics, and he happened to love the stage as a um, as a politician, and that will continue. And we Republicans will have to go through everything Trump says or does after putting a filter. The filtering will take out what an inexperienced politician will say. But last night, I found his acceptance speech to be very well done. He did somehow swayed from the script, and he made statements about the White House and all that, which were not part of it. But right after his acceptance speech, I went on CNN to understand what kind of reaction CNN was giving on his speech. And I came back from CNN before going to my bed, and I found out Trump had scared them. Trump had scared them that this guy is going to win. And Biden, he slighted to a point. Look at this. I heard Biden's speech was 24 minutes. Trump's speech was 70 minutes. Biden not even once uttered the word Trump. He made statements against Trump, but without using word Trump. And Trump on the other side uttered word Biden 41 times in his speech. So Trump is confident of what he's doing and what he's saying. And he's also confident that he will win. On the other side, Biden not mentioning the word Trump, and I know this is common behavior when we look at organizational behavior and management behavior. When they are unsure of what they are doing, they don't try to create animosities because they don't want to, they know they are not going to win. So they don't want to leave around behind them enemies. But Trump was confident. So whether it is McCain or it is Romney, or there are other Republicans, and we should understand that most politicians are in for their personal gain. Trump is an exception. And if they think things are not coming their way, then they start to become nasty. And that is how I will explain.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Dr. Bhatt, I wanted to check with you on taking the cue from Professor Amar's statement that there is an element of jealousy Romney has, and a lot of politicians, quote unquote, are annoyed that a non-politician is trying to clean the swamp, and he knows the insides of everybody. So that is what I find is that majority of the attack which Mr. Trump receives is because of his persona as a person. There have been Democrat presidents, there have been Republican presidents. The system operates in a particular way. But here is a guy who has completely upended the system in terms of his performance. My interaction, my first time I came to know the word Trump was when I was doing my master's in Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics in Pune. In India, it was known as Pune at that time. And I read an article in Time magazine saying that, the Time magazine slant of the article was that capitalist system is much better than the socialist system which India was living through at that time. And they clearly highlighted one very simple fact. And I read it myself, so I know what I'm talking about. So it said that the government, the mayor of New York was trying to particularly fix a particular problem, and it was not fixed for 8 to 10 months. And the moment it was handed over to the private sector led by Mr. Trump's company, the matter got resolved in 2 months. So they were emphasizing the efficiency and effective factor in the article to reach out to the Indians that capitalism is a better tool than socialism, which is what Indira Gandhi and the Congress at that time had adopted for India. So that said, so most of the attacks on Trump has been personal for what he has said or what he says and what he means, only he can explain. But if you look at the performance part of it, that is something very impressive. So for example, I am particularly delighted that he called out NATO to put in their share of the NATO budget. And now we have billions of dollars which NATO has received for its own security from its own members. And that has been an unpleasant truth. And as Mr. Trump said in his acceptance speech, there will be hundreds of billions of dollars that will come in the next years, which will make Europe stronger. But Europe is angry. Europeans are angry about it because the leadership has lost the control of that money, which whatever they could do about it. Perhaps Mr. Trump doesn't follow the Hindu philosophy of Satyam Uvach, Priyam Uvach. Tell the truth, but say it sweetly. Mr. Trump speaks the way he feels like. So as a result of which, many things that he says, whether he called out Islamic terrorism, whether he talked about fixing immigration problem, whether it was bringing about a crime bill, or everything else has been on his watch. He has achieved it. Is that what makes the Democrats nervous and anxious? Because the politicians love to thrive, things remaining incomplete, which is a very interesting behavioral content of a politician. He loves his constituency to suffer. He loves his constituency hoping to find things remain complicated so that they keep doing the solutions. So Doctor, how do you feel about Trump as a president, and the attacks on him are always personal?
So I think Vibhuti Ji, both you and Professor Amar brought this point out of communication and his tweets. So he sometimes leaves himself exposed and gives an opportunity, or masala as we call, to Democrats. I love the speech of Ivanka Trump she gave yesterday. And she acknowledged that the tweets and communication style could be different of her father. But at the same time, the real Donald Trump is something different. I mean, he sometimes calls a spade, as you said, Satyam Vach, Priyam Vach. He forgets the Priyam Vach part, the Madhur part. Or saying it always politically correctly. And, but what he does and what his dreams are, I mean, you can see the background, the Himalayas background here. I say that I came from a great country, and I am in a great country, which can be greater and greater here. And both countries have the freedom, the greatness, all those things, elements are there. And for me, Trump in White House will probably be a better bet for both countries to become great or greater as we go along, because we need big dreams. I mean, if he says 10 million jobs, I mean, that's a real number and a huge number. Or when Modi says 3 trillion or 5 trillion economy, I mean, those are big reach goals. And you have been in business. I mean, you know this. I mean, you have to set higher goals. So of course, the problems of today has to be controlled, but the goals for tomorrow should be big. And that's what he's telling people. He's telling it strongly. He's making people of America believe in themselves that they're strong, they can be stronger. Tough times will be over, but the toughness of America can continue. And those messages are very powerful messages. I agree with Professor Amar that he has a real chance of getting re-elected again.
That's brilliant. I will take the cue from your other part of it. You referred to Mr. Modi's big plans, and both these gentlemen have, very audacious, achievable plans for their countries. So both they have got along well. They have hit off well. Both have, make in India, make America great again, very strong pro-country thought process. And that brings me to the other topic, which is what I say always, that, I won't say big, large, or whatever, but if you look at the 3 prominent democracies of the world, and I mean no disrespect to other 3 names beyond these 3 names that I will talk about, United States, India, and UK. Let's put these 3 countries as 3 prominent democracies. I'm not saying France is not, or any other country is not, but these 3 names rank high in terms of their prominence as democracies. These three countries, all the three leaders are right of center. Boris Johnson is conservative, Trump is Republican, Modi is definitely right of center because he's talking about business developing and development is a bigger goal. So liberals are going nuts over this part. And that's what I find, that the entire liberal agenda is about that aspect, to somehow manage to upend the entire process of, they're fearing that Boris Johnson is going to be in 10 Downing Street for another 5 years, having just won the election. And Mr. Modi is going to be there for another 4 years. And if Trump comes for another 4 years, liberal agenda, they can kiss the baby goodbye for a while because they will transform the pro-business part of it. So Professor, what I wanted to hear from you is, as you interact with young people, what we know that in the universities, there is virtual brainwashing of the liberal variety. And the liberal variety education, the young people are all very liberal and totally anti-Republican Party. How did that happen? And what, if any, ideas you have had in your interactions that you can share with the audience today?
See, it is very common when you are young, you are really more liberal. As you grow old, you marry, you have children, you have family, and you move on, then you become conservative. And when you become even older, like in the 50s and 60s, then you become more religious and go back to the value system that is, again, conservative. So it is not simply what is happening now to the young. It is something that has been happening and will continue to happen. But look at this. We had capitalism that was on the win for all these years. China made the change. China is really threatening capitalism and proving that it is the communism that is better than capitalism. We always thought that we had defeated communism. And when I was in college, I read a book where the focus was The God That Failed. That was the title of the book. The God That Failed was how communism that was designed to be as good as God in terms of owning the property and in terms of the state politics and all that. And it failed. That means communism failed with Russia and with China and other communist countries. But China has come back so strong. I mean, I was in Beijing to give lecture at the Tsinghua University, which is their equivalent of Harvard. And at that time, one of the students was attached to me for helping me out and all that. And from him, I learned about what China was doing and how China was planning how to become sole superpower of the world. It's planned, so thoroughly planned. And now he and I later published an article on this. How come we in United States, we were the hegemon of capitalism and the superpower, why we did not try to take measures to cope with what China was doing? Obama, I don't really want to bring it back to Obama, but Obama left this country in a very bad shape. He went to China with a perfect plan to ask China to buy American and somehow address this balance of trade problem. And before he could do that, he got a big lecture, try to control your expenses and you are borrowing money from us and all that, and the matter was shut. And another opportunity Obama had was to handle Chinese when China, Xi Jinping was coming here and he was going to tell him they should stop stealing from America. And that time, Edward Snowden, China brought out. Exactly. a day before, and they knew because they've been monitoring everything that we had been doing. They knew what what Obama is going to bring up and what is going to happen. So when China was growing such a big power, and it was open that China was working to be sole superpower, and China was going into South China Sea and occupying a land that was not its, and going all over the world to all neighbors and snatching their land here and there. Why they didn't do anything? Why they let this problem come to a point where it has now become a question of survival? And last night, Trump said very correctly, if it is Biden, it is going to be China's word, because only Trump dared. He is not a politician. He doesn't think. He is irrational. Many times he is unpredictable. But those are the things that we needed. And I'm telling you, from 2015 and 2016, when I endorsed Trump, and I was one of the 3 professors who endorsed Trump before the primary season, and it is part of the Trump's record. I am angry at what the predecessors of Trump gave us with regard to international affairs and world affairs, and particularly China.
That's a very powerful statement. And as a student of banking and international geopolitics, I completely agree with you, because you have made a very astute observation about how things transpired with reference to China. Taking it a few years behind, when the USSR collapsed, we did not miss, the rest of the world did not care, because USSR did not manufacture anything that we consumed. The only thing that we knew Russia with was their stupid Lada cars and their Sputnik and space. That's it. So when the USSR collapsed, the Western world did not feel the pinch. China learned that lesson very quickly, because they realized that having brought down the USSR, the West is going to come to me, and they prepared. There's a very famous saying that everything has a price in America, right? And they realized that the profit motive drives the capitalist binge. And China took a very decisive political step of calling it a communistic, their pattern of capitalism, where the state controlled. So they created massive infrastructure opportunity for American manufacturers to manufacture in China, have higher profit margin by selling the same goods in China, in the United States, and the industry manufacturers were happy. I remember a very clear day, that was a conversation with somebody in the Indian consulate in New York, when China's trade deficit with the US had expanded to $42 billion. That was the day. I don't remember the time, but I know the person I spoke with. And I said that Americans are wanting you to pick up at least 10% of the manufacturing jobs that are manufacturing that is going to China. Even if we picked up 10% of that, Indian manufacturing will change. They didn't. But today, China reaped the advantage of the entire process. And they are now controlling the US economy in more ways than one. Forget about the technology transfer that Clintons did, literally gave away for certain campaign contributions. But even Obama did not fight that. Biden talks about China is not going to eat our lunch, but China pays handsome money to his son for all the deals that he has done there. So God knows what is happening in the Democratic Party from that point of view. But Dr. Saab, I would like to hear from you on that geopolitical element, that how do you see in this scenario? That professor said that how did we not see what the opposition was doing? It's like the chess game. You see the coins on the board, you see the pieces on the board, but you do not know what your opponent is thinking. So unless and until we dive into the minds of our opponent, we will never know what is happening. In this part of the world, political correctness is driving our behavior, our actions. So talking about that part, how do you feel about the Indian part of it? Because you have taken up, Doctor, you have taken up the cause that Trump must win for the benefit of India and Indians. So in that perspective, what do you think Indians must see in America instead of voting 80% in bloc for Democratic Party? Your thoughts on that?
Oh, thank you, Vibhuti Ji. I think both you and Professor Amar highlighted this point. China was really have done it very smartly. They played a subordinate role, got all the manufacturing. I mean, so America make them, all this greatness of wealth came from US companies going there for manufacturing and bringing them back and selling here. But India did very similar things. India let manufacturing go. I mean, you know, Rahul Gandhi had a signed treaty that we hear about. So the Congress government also kept promoting China from the business point of view, the deficit and all that. So China has been doing the same thing here, but maybe on a lesser scale in India. And they did it very smartly, but now they became assertive. And that assertiveness is now being recognized by both countries as a threat, which probably they had in mind, as you said. We didn't catch that what they were thinking. And now the threat in South China Sea or on the Indian border, and all that is very apparent now. And I think China will continue to be assertive if it's not checked. And who can better check him, or who can stand against China? And President Trump has shown that he can stand up against China. He, as you know, he's taken major steps towards that.
Yes, I mean, he has done it. Modi has done it. But nobody would have ever thought that India as a country would stand up to Chinese bullying in the manner that China does, where China has, using its sovereign fund, its riches. China has virtually ended up using the sovereign funds to impose killer contracts, which the countries do not like anymore. So that's the point which is very important. But I want to talk about, in the minutes that we have left, is that how the presidency of Biden and Trump will impact India and Indians, because that's very important. Who do you think, Dr. Bhatt, is more inclined towards supporting the India and the Indian cause?
Vibhuti Ji, we know that Trump's position with India and Trump's chemistry with Modi. And if President Biden, Vice President Biden becomes the president, it's not that things will just go away. I mean, they will still have friendly relations with India, but I don't see that to the same extent. And the trust that Trump has generated. So on balance, I think Trump will be much better for India. And the whole thing will just continue as continuity of a relationship. With Biden as president, it will be a new balance that will be found between the two countries, if it ever happens, which I don't think it will.
Wonderful. Professor, what I wanted to check with you is that there is a new romance going on in Democratic Party with a term called democratic socialism. And I'm 100% sure that other than political advantage of promising to do things for free or give things away, they don't have real concept of democratic socialism. People like you and I lived in India under a regime of democratic socialism, and we know what it has done to people, what it did to the country. It killed innovation, it killed leadership, it killed enterprise, it killed everything, because government became the virtual doer of everything. Anything, even if you wanted to smile, you had to take government's permission to do that. That is the meaning of democratic socialism, which Americans have no clue about because they don't know anything about it. So it is like they are taking advantage of their ignorance. So in your classes, have you ever tried to share with them the meaning of the word democratic socialism? And I'm always here to helping hand for your course, Professor. If people want to know what is democratic socialism and what it does to the body politic of a society, you can invite me. I can give a talk on that.
All right. Let's see. Americans theoretically, Americans knew what is liberalism and what is socialism and what is communism. But let's say when I was young, I heard a statement from my father, and he said uh, when Iqbal went to the UK, and his father told him, do not date any white women, don't go for white women. And he wrote back to his father, he said, you threw me in the pool and now you're telling me don't get wet, watch your clothes. So it is same thing here. America had been doing things by, culture is made by people. When you bring people who have different culture, different philosophy, different thinking, it is going to first enrich for some time when they are in small number. When their numbers start to increase, then they want power. They want their part of whatever happens. And look at 9/11 occurred, and we thought, okay, these were terrorists who attacked our country and they did such a horrific thing and it was so bad. But they gained, when I say they, I mean the people who planned it. They gained so much. I never saw women covering their heads before 9/11, and then all of a sudden, their numbers started to just increase. Now, they are in politics, they are in power, and they want us to do what they believe in. And they believe in liberal philosophy, liberal kind of government. And now their power has become so strong with the help of Sanders. If Biden won nomination, he had to sell his own thinking because Biden always was in support of unions. I know when he was nominated by Obama to be his running mate, the first statement he made is he asked the policemen, the firemen, the teachers, and others to come and support us and to give us vote. And it happened. But now, Sanders is the one who is negotiating. And Omar is the one who is negotiating. Ocasio is the one who is negotiating. So it will happen. And if Biden really does win, I'm really sorry to say this country will be finished as we have known it and as pioneers have discovered it and as our founders have established it. The only hope for the whole Western world, for the whole democratic world, for every free country is Trump.
Thank you very much for such an eloquent support for his candidacy. Dr. Saab, time is coming to an end as every wonderful conversation has to come to an end. I wanted to ask you one quick feedback from you, your thoughts on the fact that 80% to 90% of the Indians vote Democrat, whether it's a town supervisor election or a mayor election or a presidential election. What must happen for Indians to see more beyond the chessboard presence of coins and how the opponents are thinking against us? Because there is a thought I have, and I would like to both of you to come back on my program to talk about whether Hinduism is facing an existential threat. And when I say this existential threat, I don't mean that 1.3 billion Hindus will vaporize overnight. But in terms of conversation, we are not part of conversation. We are not involved and engaged in the process of governance. And as a result of which, we are becoming marginalized. But today, I want you to end the conversation with your thought that how must Indians in America, Hindus in America, must respond to this voting and whether they should vote Biden or Trump. It has to be a thoughtful process. How do you wish to accomplish that?
So, yeah, thanks for giving me that opportunity, Vibhuti Ji, because I want to bring in, my book, which is Journey from Life to Life, Achieving Higher Purpose, that has a chapter, 5 Pillars of Success, which is based on Krishna's 5 Pillars of Success. And the first one is Adhisthanam, which is the platform. And the second one is the person that is on that pedestal. So in those days, Duryodhan was on the throne, and that was not good. So even if who occupies the platform is very important. For us Indian Americans here in this country, it is crucial to decide who they are voting for, because the platform stays the same. Platform is presidency. But whether it is occupied by Mr. Trump or Mr. Biden, they have to choose carefully. And definitely, Biden, President Trump is for freedom, he's for strong America, he's for great, making it great again. And that all translates well for India as well, because we already have a good relationship going. And we also have to be watchful of the others, because at one time India was not watching what was happening. When you become good person, goodness has a weakness, because he starts seeing goodness even in the bad people. So, and then the bad person can just take over. So that America should learn from history of India, not to let that happen, whether it be China, whether it be Russia or any other enemy country, or even not enemy. People just want to dominate. So that dominance should be, watched for, and keep America strong again and great again, and go for it.
Thank you very much, both you gentlemen, Professor Amar and Dr. Krishna Bhattiji, for such a wonderful elucidation of your thought processes and the why and the how and the what of everything that we talked about today. In closing, I would only say that Indian Americans in America need to become very much more actively engaged in the democratic process. We are not. We remain very, santusht, to use the Hindi word, and we become complacent. That is one of the real enemies of our way of life, that we become complacent. Hota hai, hota rahega, dekhte hain kya hota hai. So in terms of real politics, in terms of real engagement, when you have a clear establishment of Abrahamic faith, we become the unknown, the unwanted. And that's how India has ended up becoming what I sadly call a happy hunting ground for everybody to sermonize India in terms of freedom of religion, democratic values, whereas our lifestyle was about freedom all along. We were home to every persecuted religion in the world. What missed out is the complacency factor. Ladies and gentlemen, it was great to have you viewing our show today. Have a great weekend. Be well, be safe. And thank you, Dr. Amar and Professor Amar and Dr. Krishna Bhattji. Namaste. God bless. Be well. Let's talk again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.